so glad that the peacefully now adds to the
Look at that, the
ambiance.
ambiance. Look
And,
at that.
well, I've got to cut off some of those dead
So
blossoms.
does Bill's dollar bills on his door.
Oh, yes.
I can turn that light off if it's causing issues, Chris, or you can't.
No, it's just me struggling.
Do you
Okay,
guys
actually,
still, do you have a mask mandate at your job?
yeah. Sure do. All right,
At least we have.
thank you, everybody, for joining us here in person. This is the first Ken Reeves Memorial Weather Briefing that we have had in the Weather Center in exactly 593 days. And I'm very excited to welcome AccuWeather DePodwin as our briefing presenter. And thank you, of course, to those joining us virtually on Zoom and on YouTube. And I will let you take the floor. All right, well, it's good to be, I guess, the inaugural person back. Sort of weird, I guess. And we don't even have that much of exciting weather to talk about. So it would have been different last week, I guess. We could have talked about the fun system on Saturday. As I was driving here, I was thinking we could have done an October climatology for lightning review. I didn't look at that either. So maybe some folks here have some interesting ideas, but I didn't have a chance to look at that. But I did look at some of the records across the, let's see how well this plays up here. Yeah, that's pretty good. This is from the last week, where you've got obviously a lot of records in the east, and then we shouldn't forget there was a pretty good cold surge in the west, and then this morning a couple of records, daily records across it's hourly, yeah, it's daily record low across parts of Texas this morning. So while we were warm last week, and you can see how many records were hit multiple days in a row in parts of the east, it was pretty chilly in parts of the west, and some significant snow and wind late last week with that storm as it moved out of the Rockies. So the first real fall storm of the season. And these next couple slides, I have to thank Ben Repper, because I didn't grab any of this information, but I thought this was interesting from his Twitter from the other day, and about the fact that obviously we've been really quite warm, and there's the map of the first 2 weeks of the month, and that's about +3F, and even warmer to get back into the Great Lakes for the month of October so far. And as one might expect, if you're wet, I mean, if you're warm, you're probably dry. And the only real area that had positive precip anomalies was a band that looks like I think this was early in the month, there was a round of rain along the front across parts of New York and the Mohawk Valley and down into Massachusetts. Everyone else is basically going dry for the month of October so far, which changed obviously on Friday or Saturday when the front that came through. And through the 15th, Erie, Williamsport, State College were the warmest month to date for October on record, third warmest in Scranton, fourth in Harrisburg, fifth in Pittsburgh, and 10th in Allentown and Philly. It's also a good airport identifier quiz there as well. And to further on, again, this is all from Ben, so I can't take credit, but I thought it was worth sharing that. What does this mean for November? It's interesting that this will likely go down as the top 15 warmest Octobers in State College. There's a couple of cool shots probably in the next 2 weeks, but overall it looks pretty mild, or at least normal. If you take the top 15 warmest Octobers as an analog, 12 of those 15 had Novembers that were colder than average. And on the right there is the analog package of those 15 warmest Octobers and what it meant for November for 1,000 millibar air temp anomalies. And you can see it's pretty good signal of chillier than normal temperatures in the east. And a lot of the guidance is pointing toward that. This is the week 4 ECMWF monthly forecast. So this is just the week ending 15th November. That's here, it's either 15th. But you can see that it's trying to show a bit of a mean trough in the east, so not significant, but decent anomalies in the west. And there is an upcoming stratospheric warming event. I'm not an expert on stratospheric warming events, but there's definitely a correlation between those and cold shots a couple of weeks later in the northern hemisphere. It depends on, I think people get caught up in the fact that a lot of times when we talk about stratospheric warming events, it's always cold in the east, but that's not necessarily true. The cold can really dislodge anywhere in the northern hemisphere. And there's a lot of signs that from our long-range team at AccuWeather that point towards it being a chillier November than certainly October has been. So we'll transition to the weather today, and I think Chris introduced me. For those who don't know me, I'm Dan DePodwin, Director of Forecast Operations at AccuWeather. Here's my crude surface analysis from this morning. I don't just do this for you, Bill. I do it every day. And pretty quiet. 1024 high across Tennessee, you see the northwest flow across the northeast with the departing storm for over the weekend. Good warm air advection with trying to start across the plains again ahead of this next cold front that's over the Great Basin and is going to bring some snow to parts of Utah and the mountains of Wyoming and Colorado. But overall, pretty quiet. This time of year is always nice when you don't have tropical systems. It seems like you can have a pretty quiet stretch of weather, which is a nice break after what happened the last couple of years, especially last year in the first part of this tropical season. So I will switch to sharing my browser. Before we look at models, I apologize, I didn't have a chance to pull up anything because we were having some technical difficulties. But here's our satellite this morning with, as one might expect, with that northwest flow across the northeast, you've got some pretty good low-level and mid-level clouds. With the high in the middle of the country, or the southeast, I should say, it's mainly quiet, a few clouds across the Gulf Coast. And as the sun comes up here in the west, I'll pause it, and you can see, as you might expect there, with that surface trough, there's some clouds and more clouds to head further west, and just starting to see the sun there across the southwest. So there's our satellite. Anyone else have any interesting things they see here that are worth pointing out?
That you could sort of weekend, you could see the snow in the Dakotas. I think a lot of it is probably faded by now. You can't see it because of the clouds.
Yeah, they had some really good snow. They had over 2 feet of snow in parts of the day. I can't see it at this point. Maybe you can see it in the middle of the day. But, yeah, they had some pretty good snow in the Dakotas. Winds gusted to 65 miles an hour in Rapid City. It really was quite impressive storm out there. If you look at the radar, one might expect to see not much happening, and that's exactly what we see. We've got there's some decent, sort of combination lake effect and just instability showers here. You can see it's clouded up pretty quickly here this morning after a pretty clear start to the day with cumulus, some Q building and some pretty. I won't go and zoom in, but you can see that there's some decent showers across New York, and then our storm in the west that has some snow across parts of Nevada. And good news for parts of California, which obviously have been in significant drought. I also heard this morning that Sacramento got their first measurable rainfall, and I forget the number of days. It was I think it was the longest dry stretch ever. They had 100 of rain this morning, which is as a friend of mine said this morning, that's like dew on my grass. But people were apparently like in the streets, like really excited about it this morning. So, good news for the West with that. So let's go in a little further, and we'll focus mainly on the Northeast here. It's a pretty quiet weather pattern overall, so I'm not sure I've got a ton of interesting nuggets to pull out, but anyone else can feel free to jump in. It's chilly. It feels cold, but it's fairly normal for this time of year. The temps in the 50s this morning, all across the Northeast, and 40s. I think it's a balmy 25 on Mount Washington with 60-mile visibility and freezing fog, as one might expect. But overall, a really nice fall start of the week. And we'll go to the GFS and European here for this afternoon. We'll start at the upper levels. And, we're post-frontal here, and we have basically high pressure at the surface, but with that northwest flow aloft and really low heights, very cold air aloft, you can obviously understand why there's a cloud cover. And the good rule of thumb is wait till the trough axis passes you by to start forecasting clear skies at State College, especially if you don't have a northwest flow. So pretty cloudy day, but by the evening stuff should start to fade away, I would think. And tomorrow, as we look, the heights start to rise, and tomorrow is probably a really nice day. And milder too. Heights rise significantly tomorrow. European, as one might expect in the short term, shows basically the same thing tomorrow afternoon, toggling between the two. Still going to be pretty cool with some showers probably lingering across northern New England, but we should really turn nicer here. Other features that sort of catch my eye on this is obviously there's a ridge in the middle of the country across the Midwest, so probably pretty nice there. And then you've got another bowling ball upper level low across the Great Basin, which will be your next weather maker, although not as significant as the one previous. aside from that, nothing else really to talk about. The closed off low here rolls to the east and is across Colorado, Wyoming. By tomorrow afternoon, one would expect snow and rain with that. We also expect quiet weather further east. And then if we look ahead towards Wednesday, that cutoff gets stuck in the, gets caught up in the flow, and the westerlies is moving along pretty nicely. So it's not a slow moving cutoff. We've got a new trough coming into the west. They've had some pretty significant rain in Vancouver. I haven't looked at the stats. Maybe I can connect to that and see. But we were forecasting a fair amount of rain from Vancouver with a pretty persistent flow of Pacific air over the weekend. I don't know if anyone had a chance to look all the way there. Let's see. Yeah, they've had close to 3 inches of rain in Vancouver in the last 2 days, which is very significant considering the normal precip. They're up to 4 inches of precip for the month. The normal precip date in October is only 1.76. So very wet start of the month of October in Vancouver. The rainy season doesn't really start until later in the month usually, I think, up there. But there's been a lot of storms early in the Pacific Northwest this year, which is good news. Any precipitation anywhere on the west is something that's good. So by Wednesday, we've got a really good-looking cutoff across James Bay and just south of Hudson Bay here in Canada. And this cutoff that's rolling east, and it gets uncut off. It opens up, I guess is the way to say it, and moves into the Great Lakes. And that's going to be our next weather maker here in State College, but we're quiet until then. So again, sort of at the upper levels, we're going to get the trough that moves out. Ridge builds in tomorrow. The heights are looked at their highest on Wednesday night. And then we get the heights start to fall on Thursday as we get that short wave approaching. And that'll bring us what will likely be a frontal passage and probably some showers before we get chilly for the weekend. And I guess the important Penn State thing is homecoming. So what might we expect for homecoming? Here's the GFS for Friday evening for the parade, which I assume is happening. Yeah? Yep. Great. And so looks like it could be unsettled. Lots of little pieces of energy here in the flow. Heights are lowering. The front probably is through. We'll take a look at the surface here in a minute. But and by Saturday for the game, the GFS has a pretty potent shortwave here, and Euro tries to show a fair amount as well. So maybe an interesting forecast for the Penn State game at noon on Saturday. So we'll bring it back to the surface here and look out in time. As we'd expect with the upper air pattern, we have a large area of high pressure in the east. By tomorrow, it's off the Carolina coast, South Carolina coast. We're not really in the return flow yet. I mean, we are a little bit at the surface, I guess, but it's really not, it'll be milder tomorrow than today. It should be a brilliant day, really. And Wednesday turns warmer. As we get more into that southerly southwesterly flow on the backside of the high. Here's our system in the Midwest, which looks like all rain at this point. Just eyeballing it here with the 850 temps. Don't just use 850 temps for eyeballing it. But look at soundings too. But looks like we're pretty mild on the backside of the slow with the 0 line at 850 way far west. So wouldn't expect much in the way of snow, maybe a little bit here across parts of South Dakota Wednesday, but overall it's not that chilly of a system. By Thursday morning, pretty good consensus that our lows across the Great Lakes with a trailing front down into the Tennessee Valley. Looks like we start the day dry Thursday, and probably Thursday is the mildest day of the week, most likely given the fact that the warm air affecting ahead of the cold front. By Thursday afternoon, front is to our west, and again, we're pretty, at least between these two model runs, in a good agreement on timing of this front. And by Friday, front is south of State College. You can see it here in the pink isobars down across Virginia. Interestingly, not a very moist system, that's for sure. Really doesn't have a lot with it at the surface, at least QPF wise. But so just so we don't get caught up in QPF, looking at 700 millibar relative humidity. There's a narrow band with the front that you can see on Thursday afternoon. And that moves east by Thursday night. Friday, we drop quickly at the mid levels behind the front. So forecast wise, seems like pretty good bet that it's dry except for maybe an instability shower today, and then we'll dry through Wednesday and into Thursday morning with a frontal passage on Thursday afternoon. I was going to say thunder is hard to get this time of year, but it seems like no matter what we try to do here, we keep getting thunder. I can pull up, I'll open a new tab here. We can pull up some instability parameters for Thursday. Before I do that, though, I guess let's talk about the weekend. So that front comes through. The forecast gets interesting anytime you have a front hung up, and you've got an upper level low and piece of energy that is riding along it. You're set up for a tricky forecast. Here's Friday afternoon. Looks like maybe some showers across the Mid-Atlantic. You can see a lot of chilly air up here in Reeves in Canada. And then the interesting thing is how this all unfolds. So here's the GFS for Friday night. We'll just mouse through it. Pretty dry. Overall, it will be a dry game. Could spritz. Probably pretty chilly, pretty fall-like. Probably a perfect type of day for homecoming. Here's the European with this low that tries to get going off the eastern seaboard and bring rain to the northeast Saturday. So that's something to watch. That's certainly plausible. All depends on how these shortwaves move around this trough and where the front is and how much moisture is left over. So definitely going to go with a dry forecast Saturday. At this point, it seems like there's at least some likelihood of precipitation at some point during the day on Saturday. Any other thoughts, questions? Rob, have you put out a forecast for on weather for homecoming yet?
Well, we did. No, I just think the extended, it didn't include next weekend. John had 12-day trends. I think he had a chance for rain
He had showers and
on Friday or Sunday. Maybe.
he had Saturday, Sunday showers. I had weak chance of showers for Friday.
I do the extended today, so I'll be going through that period.
Are we ever going to get below average anytime?
That's a great question. Let's look at that before we go. Yeah, we'll take a look at some ensembles and long range here in a minute, but just want to look at the surface. Here's Thursday, surface-based cape and 0 to 6 kilometer shear. Not much. The system that came through Saturday was pretty anomalous. You don't typically get those types of storms this time of year. With the amount of, it was in the mid to upper 80s in DC on Thursday or on Friday. So pretty unusual. Like we'll be a little slow here. I'll load that. I'll pull up the some of the ensembles for the weekend and beyond. We use the Euro ensemble. 5-day 2-meter, and let's do precip, 6-hour precip exceeding 100th and 10th of an inch. Here's the I want to pull dew point. Yeah, here's the dew point for Wednesday. We're dry all week here, right? Not a lot of surface moisture. So here's Thursday ahead of the front. Dew points try to get into the 50s. So probably not very likely to have any thunder on Thursday. Couldn't rule it out like this, but I wouldn't forecast. I don't think at this point. In the longer range, first let's look at the ensemble probability. This is from all 50 members plus the control run of the European for, again, Thursday. You get a sense of the front timing to see if it's consistent. And here's Thursday afternoon. Looks like at this point the models are pretty, or the ensemble is pretty consistent that precip doesn't happen before 2 p.m. on Thursday, but likely afterwards as the front moves east and into the evening hours. So looking, and then if we move it to sort of our chances between 8 p.m. and 2 a.m. Friday into Saturday for precip here, the European ensemble is close by with a 30 to 40% chance of measurable precipitation on Friday night, but really nothing in the way of appreciable precipitation over 1/10 of an inch. As you would expect to see the signal of over 1/10 of an inch blossom on Saturday with that coastal low, but the probabilities are pretty low, 20, 25, 30%. But they do have a decent chance, more like 30 to 40% chance of measurable precipitation locally on Saturday. So the ensemble QPF is pretty consistent with the upper pattern, what one might expect, given the trough here in the east. So it seems to me like a forecast of clouds, some sun, cool, maybe a shower if you want this point for Saturday. Overall, you probably couldn't ask for a more typical mid-October homecoming. To answer the question of when will it get below average, here's the 5-day 2-meter temp from the Euro ensemble. So that's ending 8 p.m. Friday. I'll go all the way out to the end of the run. We'll bounce through it here. I haven't looked at this yet, so mild, mild, mild. Oh, well, close. There you go. I mean, I think depends how this upper trough. This is just the instantaneous 500 millibar anomaly, but you know, if this trough is as deep as or deeper than the models are portraying it, and it does linger for as long as it's showing, I think you get a stretch where you get a couple days below normal over the weekend into next week. You can see that picks up by, you know, the 5-day period ending next Wednesday is normal or slightly below. But there's a lot of warmth still in the middle of the country. So anytime you get a zonal flow, you'll just bring that east. By Saturday, you know, the 5-day period ending on Halloween here, wild. That's sort of been our team's thinking for the rest of the month. Is there a shot or two of chillier air, but overall it's normal to above. How November goes, it seems like that could be different. That's at least a lot of people's thinking at this point. Is that November will be a much chillier month. So.
What's striking about the image you're showing right now is central Canada.
Yeah.
And how warm they continue to be.
Yes, I haven't looked at any snowpack up there yet, but yeah, I mean, if you look at the you can't see it off the map, but you get a sense for what the ridge is across northern Canada. This is next Sunday, and it just continues. The heights are just way above normal over Hudson Bay. You can see a lot of Pacific air here in the pattern coming in from the southwest, riding up all the way into Canada. That's pretty impressively mild pattern. As you'd expect, by the end of the period here, your ensembles are pretty washed out. It's pretty zonal, but maybe you get into a tropical pattern by the end of the month. And there's some support from other guidance that by the end of the month or early November, you get more of a ridge to the west and tropical east. So and that would be more of a change. Any other interesting thoughts or questions people have? Has anyone looked at October's lightning climatology and how much lightning we got here on that impressive storm?
Somebody had something on Twitter Saturday. It wasn't lightning. It was tornado warnings for the Pittsburgh office. That was the first time, like early in the morning.
And I think I saw somebody post that there have been more severe thunderstorm warnings in the state of Pennsylvania this year than any other record.
Was that Brian Sell? I feel like he had some really interesting stuff.
2019.
Yeah, he's been really finding some interesting data.
Let's see if I can figure out how to do this. You should plot the lightning strikes on Saturday. Let's see if I can get it to work. I haven't done this in a while. Yeah, there you go. Center County lightning.
Wow, that was a bullseye.
Wow.
Center County lightning capital of the state. This is ending at 18Z on Saturday, so there was lightning further east, but I mean 132 strikes. I don't know if I've got a Center County map up on it. Yeah, again, it's hard to see the small dots, but you get the picture here. All these strikes, 123 strikes. I don't know if this is all. I'm not sure if this is cloud to ground or all strikes, but pretty impressive to have that many within that time period in the middle of October. I think that's all I got. Any other questions, comments?
Those of you joining us on Zoom and YouTube are also more than welcome to comment as well. I've got the various screens going over here. I'm keeping an eye on all the chats, so feel free to drop questions in there. Y'all in here either?
take 3 days of quiet weather. It's been nice. It's been a really nice stretch of weather, certainly.
Yeah, it's finally,
Perfect fall
it's
weather.
finally back to our fire season.
Yes. It's good. Very good relatable way to put it.
Or sweater weather.
Sweater weather, yeah. Right.
All right, well, Dan, thank you very much. And thank you all for joining us both in person and on Zoom. This weather briefing is archived as always on our YouTube page at youtube.com/Campus Weather Service. Next week, we'll be going back to the virtual meetings because we will have an out-of-stater giving next week's presentation. It will be News Center Maine meteorologist Ryan Breton joining us at the same time, same place on Zoom, 10:15 a.m. Eastern. And I look forward to seeing all of you next week. Have a great week, everybody.
Thank you. You too.